Lovely. So, hi everyone, and welcome to the Legislative Framework for Advertising in Germany. So just a couple of kind of house rules. We are recording this webinar, so don't worry if you kind of join a bit later, or if you'd like to share it with your colleagues, because I'll send out the recording in a follow-up email straight after the event. There's also going to be a chance for Q&A towards the end. So if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to make a note of those, and there will be an opportunity to ask them towards the end. So this is the second webinar I've been conducting in our series with Thomas. So hi, Thomas. Thank you for joining me. So we're basically going to be focusing on basically Thomas's specialities. So Thomas owns our German franchise in Germany, and he's also an expert in market research. So we'll be really focusing on everything that Thomas can bring to the table for my webinars as well. And today we're focusing literally on Germany and what the advertising legislation is like in Germany in particular, because obviously I talk about the EU a lot and other global territories, but we haven't focused on Germany before. So the agenda today. So I'll be looking at the advertising standards and the organisations which regulate them within Germany in particular. Any legislation surrounding advertising claims, challenges of advertising and exporting in Germany. Thomas is going to take us through some case studies of some successful product tests he's done within Germany. And we're also going to touch on some withdrawn adverts, so you give you an idea of what not to do as well. Things like preparing your samples for research and submitting your evidence will also be covered. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a good kind of overview of what kind of organisations you should be looking for in Germany, and what kind of legislation there is in particular, and how you can then conduct the research to substantiate your advertising claims. So Thomas, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Karis. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm a market researcher by heart and profession, and it's been almost all my life, at least all my professional life. I've gone through 25 years of experience, mainly in Unilever, where I had the opportunity to work on a local and a global level on a number of categories, and really discovered my deep desire to bring insights to people and bring insights to company, and realizing actually that you can't really do successful business without having the right insights. And as I said, this is my passion to bring this forward, and I was very happy to be able to join Aiton Global Research as an agency that can promote this and can do research in a specialized way, in a very simple and very also cost and time efficient way. I wish I had known them before in my professional Unilever life. So anyway, I've been with them now with Aiton Global Research now for 6 years. I'm running the German business, and I'm also a bit of the expert of market research in the organization, and I think that's enough for me.
Lovely, thank you, Thomas. And so for those of you that don't know me, I'm the Regulatory Director at Aiton Global Research. So obviously, as we're consumer research providers, most people are doing consumer research for things like substantiating advertising claims. So I'm really interested in what the advertising regulations are, and how we can make sure that our research and our processes fitting in with the advertising regulations globally, because we're a global country. So I started off about 8 years ago at Aiton Global Research as a study manager. Understood what it is that the clients have to go through when they want to put in a study, the reasons they're doing it, and how we design the study around that. And then I've obviously made my way into a more regulatory role. So I still meet with clients regularly to talk about their advertising claims, how they need to substantiate them, give them the best testing methodologies. And obviously, if it's something that we can't substantiate through consumer research, I'll be able to point people in the right direction with our partners that can do other kinds of research as well. So I see myself as the hub for kind of regulatory advice at Aiton Global Research. So always feel free to reach out to me. So to start off the webinar content, I want to talk about the cosmetics market within Germany in particular. Now, obviously, this is a cosmetics market. There might be people from other FMCG categories as well, but as most of you probably know, cosmetics is really where you see the most advertising claims. So it's really where we're focusing a lot of our studies towards, and when we're really conscious of the advertising standards in those countries, because there's a lot more claims to be made compared to a lot of other industries. So if you're not part of the cosmetics industry, don't worry. This will also be really relevant, but it just gives us an idea of kind of targeting where most of you will be from. So Germany has the largest cosmetic market in Europe. So it's a really important place to kind of be selling. If you are not selling in Germany already, or if you are, it's certainly a place to be selling if you are a cosmetics company, because it's the largest market. It's got the largest distribution channel as well. So there's a lot of cosmetics coming out of Germany. So again, if you're manufacturing within Germany, it's really important you know what your advertising standards are, not just for Germany, but globally as well. So always feel free to reach out for that. So prestige beauty is also really high up in Germany. And again, the reason I bring that up is because that's again where we see more advertising claims. You find that the more prestige a brand is, or the more luxury a brand is, the more claims you want to make about your product, because you need to prove that it's worth what the extra money is, basically, with your consumers. So again, it's a really good place to think about if you are a luxury brand. It's very similar to that of the UK. I know a lot of people that have joined today will be from the UK. So if you're not already looking at Germany, it's certainly somewhere to be thinking of. I want to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on Germany as well, because I think at this current time, we can't ignore that obviously things have changed. Things are going to keep on changing with COVID, and things will never return to normal, as we kind of keep saying. It's sort of returning to normal, but I don't think there will ever be the same normal as what we knew it before. So generally, there's been, so the IKW, which I'll talk about a little bit later, have said that obviously there's been an impact. This is in March. They said there will be a noticeable impact soon. So obviously we've started to see that. But generally, there was a positive increase in things like hand disinfectant soaps, everything that's kind of been across the globe, really. So companies that were doing things for disinfectants were doing very well, whereas everything else had a slight dip. And that was also to do with things like kind of getting the right raw materials. There was a huge shortage, packaging. We definitely saw some changes, but things are progressing. I've definitely seen a difference, a shift with our clients being able to place their studies. So it's one of those things, kind of don't ignore it, but I think things are going to improve as well. Also wanted to put your attention to, because obviously Germany's in Europe, the Working Together platform for Cosmetics Europe. So it's kind of been put together as a one-stop shop for information on the ongoing crisis. So if you've not heard of that before, it might be something you want to take a look at, because it's kind of got EU guidance and policies and everything that'll be changing with COVID. It's just a really useful source if you are in the cosmetics industry. So to start off with, I want to talk about ad self-regulation. So when we're talking about advertising standards in all countries, it tends to start with ad self-regulation, because that's generally how ads are regulated in each country. So generally, if you haven't kind of looked at it before, ad self-regulation is a way for the advertising industry to actively regulate itself and ensure that advertisements are legal, decent, honest, and truthful. So there's your four kind of keywords, no matter where you're advertising. Always think about legal, decent, honest, and truthful with every advertising claim that you're thinking about, every form of advertising you're looking at. Always have those keywords, because it doesn't really matter what country you're advertising in. Most of them will have an advertising self-regulatory authority or organization, and they will all kind of have that general guidance for advertising as well. So there are three parts of the industry that you always need to be aware of again. And if you're from any of those three parts, there's advertising who pay for the advertising. The advertising agency is responsible for its form and its content, and the media that carry it. So if you're part of any of those kind of branches of the industry, you should be really aware of the advertising self-regulation in the countries that you are selling or advertising. Essentially, they are a complaints platform. So people, whether it's your competitors or your consumers, if the consumer was to purchase your product and thought it didn't work, it didn't live up to your advertising claims, or if your competitor saw your product come on the market and thought, I don't know how they've managed to get those claims, I don't believe that they have done that honestly, they will complain about your advert to their local advertising self-regulatory organization. That organization will then come to you, check all your evidence, and if your advertisements fail to meet their standards, they will either be corrected or removed. So it's really important to be aware of what their standards are, essentially, to make sure that you are living up to them, because no one is ever safe from a complaint, but you will always be safe from a case or having that complaint upheld if you do have the correct evidence. So I've heard people sort of say before, well, the advertising authorities can come to you and say that your advert is going against their standards, but they can't really do anything about it. they can absolutely do something about it. They will make sure that your advert does not show in that form until it's either corrected or removed. So always be really cautious. A couple of kind of global organizations to think of if you're looking at advertising self-regulation. So ICC, so the International Chamber of Commerce, they've got a framework for self-regulatory organizations to adopt. So that's always a really good place to start, because most advertising SROs are going to have been using that framework, and you can see which countries are using that framework as well on their website. There's also ICAS, which is the International Council of Advertising Standards. So they are they're a kind of group of countries that was started by the European Advertising Standards Association, and is actually a global committee or council, basically. So they kind of share news on there about any changes to global regulations. And indeed, Germany falls under that bracket as well as part of the EASA. So without further ado, let me talk about the EASA. So the European Advertising Standards Alliance is 40 organisations, so 27 self-regulatory organisations. So that's the self-regulation oh my goodness, can't get my words out. That is the self-regulatory organisations we've just discussed. And there's also 13 organisations which represent the advertising ecosystem. And I'll talk about Germany's one shortly as well. Sorry. And again, there's those same words again. So they're making sure that ads are legal, decent, honest and truthful, but they're just focusing on Europe. So it's really important to be aware of, because Germany itself obviously has its own advertising standards, but even if you're abiding by the German advertising standards, you also need to be aware of the EASA and what their standards are, because it's obviously a part of Europe. So I do find that, I'll go through this a little bit later, there isn't as much detail on the German Advertising Standards Authority's website about what their standards are as there is on the EASA. So because you're lacking that detail, possibly, you might find that your adverts are certainly, don't look like they're going against their standards, but actually they could be going against the EASA. So please take a look at that as well if you're looking at advertising in Germany. We've also got the German Advertising Federation. So this isn't a self-regulatory organisation. This is one of those advertising organisations that you need to be aware of in Germany. So basically, their aim is to achieve politically balanced and optimal economic conditions for the advertising industry. So basically, they're promoting a competitive industry. It should be competitive with advertising, but making sure it's fair. So there should be growth, innovation in Germany with the adverts. So they should definitely be pushing themselves, pushing your advertising claims, but obviously it's making sure that they are still fair to other competitors. So obviously you can look on their website, because they keep their members and associate members informed at all times. So it may be something that you want to look at having a membership for advertising in Germany. They also can give advice on things like the pre-screening of the design and conduct of surveys. So it's something, if you, obviously we can conduct the research, but they would be able to advise if that research will live up to German advertising standards as well. Certainly something that we specialise in. So I'm not saying that we can't tell you that, we absolutely can. But it's one of those things, if you wanted to get a kind of a second opinion, if you had a survey and you were like, oh, I'm not sure if this is going to live up to German advertising standards, that's what they specialise in. So they basically have obviously associations that are involved with them. So one is German Advertising Standards Council, which is their SRO, and they've also got the German Data Protection Council for online advertising. So the German Advertising Standards Council is what I want to bring up next. So this is the self-regulation. This is the self-regulatory organisation. And these are the people that deal with the complaints in Germany, those advertising complaints. So if the complaint is upheld, so if a complaint gets put to the German Advertising Council, they are asked to modify or discontinue the advertisement. And if you don't, what they do is they issue a reprimand and make the case public. So this is what I was saying earlier about, they can't do anything. They absolutely do. So if they would come with you with the complaints and say they want to see your evidence and you didn't, or you kind of ignored them, or just refused to, they would make the case public, so bad press straight away on your advertising claims, and they can issue a reprimand. So that obviously will vary depending on the case, but it could be things like fines and stuff like that. So you don't really want to have that fall upon you. If a breach of law is suspected, they pass on the case to authorities without delay. Breach of law is usually going to be not necessarily misleading unless it was very purposeful, so not necessarily to give you evidence, but it's probably things to do with offensive adverts as well, or things competition law, anything that goes against competition law. So be very cautious of advertising, and yeah, just be really aware of their standards and making sure that you have everything ready to present to them if they need it. There's also the advertising information group. So I just want to give you some more resources to have a look at if you're advertising in Germany. So it's actually got more people involved. So it's got the Austria as well, and the UK are also part of the advertising information group. But they have a newsletter basically that they make accessible on their website. So it's really good to know about news that's going on in advertising in Germany. And anything that comes up about any sort of cases that have come up, they will all kind of be put on there. So again, just giving you another resource to put your attention to if you're advertising in Germany. Examples of advertising law. So this is what I was saying earlier, that if the German Advertising Standards Council find a advert is actually going against the law rather than kind of going against their standards, then that gets put over to the authorities. So again, just kind of pointing your attention at some laws that are involved in Germany. So you've got the Unfair Competition Act. So obviously making sure that competitors aren't marketing you're not marketing your products in a way that's unfair to your competitors, essentially. And there's also, basically, there's no general clearance procedure for advertising. So this is why I want to bring this up as well. So there's nothing saying this is the advertising law and this is what the laws are. They tend to fall under sector-specific laws in Germany. So be really, really aware of those. So again, there's just an example there saying the advertising food products, which will will have health benefits or anything like that. It's approved by the European Commission. So again, it's to be fair, it's very vague. My point is very vague here, but I'm saying to be really aware that the sector-specific laws. So if you can't see an advertising law about something that you're advertising, look at the sector-specific. So obviously, you'll always know what category your product is, whether it's a cosmetic or a food or a medicine. So look at the laws to do with advertising those products in particular, because that is what you'll need to be really aware of. So the European Commission I've just brought up. So again, if you're making products anywhere in the EU, you need to be aware of the EU Commission, and certainly for cosmetics. So you've got the regulation for cosmetic products, and that also basically it strengthens the safety of cosmetic products, but it streamlines the framework. So there's advice on there about what claims you can make about cosmetics as well. So it's just a really helpful starting point, I guess, if you're looking at developing a cosmetic product for the EU. You can have a look on there and see what kind of claims you can make. So that's kind of a huge overview of the regulations for advertising and the advertising for cosmetics. Another really helpful source, if you're looking at kind of EU regulations in general for cosmetics and claim substantiation, is the IKW. Basically, yeah, they kind of put in specific reference to Germany for any updates to the EC cosmetics regulation. So it's just a helpful source, basically. I kind of wanted to point your direction to that company. So have a look on there if you're advertising in Germany or if you're developing cosmetics in Germany. Sorry. So what is consumer research? So we've talked about advertising standards. I've talked a lot about what kind of laws you need to be aware of, and that you need evidence, so you're making sure you're not doing misleading claims. But how do you get that evidence? So ACE Global Research are providers of consumer research. So we are looking at perception claims for products. We're not looking at objective claims that are done through science or through clinical studies. We're looking at the subjective claims from the participants. What do the participants notice when they use the product? Are those clinical claims substantiated further through consumer research? You might have a claim that says reduces the wrinkles by such and such percentage. And you can get that through your clinical research. That's a measurement, it's something scientific. But it's no good if your product goes on the market and the consumer can't notice the difference in their wrinkles. So consumer research really gives you that opportunity, A, to substantiate your scientific claims further, or your ingredient claims further, But it also gives you a chance to make those claims that you simply can't prove through science. So things like, I would buy this product. I feel like I look younger. I've had compliments on my skin. These are really nice cosmetic claims that obviously are completely subjective to the participant and aren't something you can measure. So generally we do in-home studies. So the participants sent the products to test at home, and they do an online questionnaire. They can do things like before and after photos at home. They can do video testimonials. They can do testimonials in general about the product. So it's basically anything that they can do from their own home is what we do through consumer research there. It reflects the actual conditions of the product in use. So this is really important. It gives you a chance to test out your usage directions. Are the usage directions you're putting out there going to help satisfy the claims you want to make? If you're telling the participants to use a shampoo every other day, is it giving the right effect to the product, the right effects that you need that product to do? Is it going to live up to those claims? Do they need to use it less? Do they need to use it more? Do they understand your usage directions? We've done product tests before where we've had a UK product that's done very successfully in the UK. We've sent it to China. They've looked at the usage directions, and because it's not a product they're familiar with using, it was a cleansing balm, by the way. So because they're not used to cleansing with a balm, they're used to cleansing with something that isn't oily. They basically weren't really sure what the effects they were supposed to get by using the usage instructions. It needed to be much more clear in terms of what we were actually asking them to how to use the product. So our client was able to use their usage directions and amend them for the Chinese market. It also helps for adverse reactions. So if people have undesirable events reported during the study, obviously adverse reactions are generally measured through things like patch tests in a clinical setting. But again, what happens when you release those products to a large amount of participants, so not a small group, maybe 100 participants, and again they're using it without any kind of moderation by anyone applying it. They're using it how they're using the actual product. So it gives you a really good indicator of any adverse reactions it may not have been picked up on in clinical testing. So generally they're assessing the efficacy of a product, or they might be comparing products as well. So that could be comparing against a competitor. It could be comparing against a formulation. If you need to make any changes to your formulation, or you want to do a new and improved formula, they're able to do that as well. And for some claims, you may need additional evidence. So as mentioned, that this is only for subjective claims, you could need additional evidence. And we have a really good network of partners that we can suggest for you if we feel that you need further evidence to substantiate your claims. So why else to conduct consumer research? So basically to give you an overview of why you might want to use consumer research. You want to substantiate your advertising claims. Obviously, that's what today is really about. Also testing that product efficacy. So we're saying about usage directions, that really falls under that kind of bracket. It's ensuring your product is regulatory and legally compliant in your chosen market. So for example, if you had something like a foundation and it was a long-lasting foundation, you may have a wealth of evidence behind your product having it tested in the UK to say that it's long-lasting. Now you want to release your product to Malaysia. They have a very different climate. That long-lasting claim no longer lives up to that temperature. So before kind of risking it and having your claims complained about in Malaysia, you can do a consumer research test, find out if your claims are substantiated there first, and it gives you that confidence when you're releasing your products that they are going to live up to the advertising standards in those markets. It kind of works the same with product acceptability with your target group. So that's not necessarily about countries as well. That could be things like if you knew you wanted, if you had an anti-aging product and you wanted women that use the product between a certain age, you want to make sure that it's accepted by those women, because they're the people that you're going to sell your product to. And it helps you target your key demographic. So again, with that, you're targeting that demographic, finding out the acceptability, as well as finding out if the product is regulatory compliant in your chosen countries. You can also find out if the people in that country like the product. It might have a very different reaction to the countries that you're currently selling in, and there may be a very different propensity to buy. So before, again, releasing your product on the market, you can get all of that information before releasing it and saving you kind of a bit of money there as well. So examples of some kind of claims that we can get from consumer research. Things like 88% of people agree that it moisturizes the skin. 9 out of 10 women would recommend this product to a friend. 96% of people agree that this is the best their skin has ever looked. They're just kind of small examples there to kind of get your imagination going if you're thinking about what kind of claims that you can make. So once you've got your advertising claims, you've done your consumer research, where can you use those advertising claims? So the truth is you can use them anywhere. They can be used on packed copy, on websites, social media, TV. It's about having your claims substantiated. Once they're substantiated, those claims can be used. It's very well to be saying they can be used everywhere. Let's have a look at some examples. So I've chosen some German brands, obviously to be nice and relevant for Germany. So we've got things like Art Deco. They've got, this is on that, taken straight from their website screenshots. They've got some claims there about lines and wrinkles caused by dry skin appear less apparent. Again, this is subjective. They appear less apparent. It's all about the wording with these kinds of claims. After using the cream for an extended period, the eye area feels nourished and soft. The cream has a pleasant scent and a lovely consistency. Again, lovely consistency. It's a very subjective claim, and people would recommend it. So we've got some excellent claims on their website. Leader again, they're looking at it calms the skin, and it's a parent's assessment. So the parents have used the product and said that it calms the skin of their children. Augustinus Bader, I think that's how you say it. And he's got some user trial results, or they've got some user trial results, sorry, on their website. And again, things like appears brighter. That's a really good subjective claim. It feels protected, appears healthier. The appearance of scars is less noticeable. The product lessens the appearance of unwanted redness. It's about claim wording when you're looking at subjective claims. So we can't say the skin is less red because obviously it's a measurement. You say it appears less red or it lessens the appearance. So we can really help with claim wording for stuff like that as well. Also, advertising claims on social media. So Augustinus Bader again, they've used one of their user trial claims and put it straight onto their Instagram. So it's really attractive for their consumers. They sent in a 12-week consumer study. So they've got it all written in their kind of, in the body of their text there. And they kind of had a swipe along of all the different claims they had. I also wanted to pick up on Dr. Hauschka because they've put on their Facebook a review from their consumers. Now, reviews are really important to be aware of as well because it's great having reviews. But if you have no claim substantiation and you only rely on product reviews, they're essentially becoming your claims. So it's really important to make sure that you also have claim substantiation and you're not just relying on product reviews. Because if people complain about your product and you have no evidence and you can say, well, we've just had these reviews from our consumers, it's not going to withstand scrutiny from advertising authorities. So I thought it was a really important one to bring up for you as well. So now I'm going to hand over to Thomas, who's going to go through some case studies. So over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Karis. So just to share an example with you of what we've done in Germany, and indeed what Karis just explained is a kind of bread and butter business in our lives, that we do indeed all these kinds of tests for claims. And I just brought one example with me, which is a kind of very typical one, which was a night cream that one of my clients wanted to test in Germany. It's a manufacturer of personal care products for reasons that you probably understand. I will not share the name of the client. But the key was actually to test the efficacy of the product during and after use. This was the primary objective, but of course we also wanted to test on the acceptance of the product, see if there's anything that needs to be developed, because these kind of tests are also a wonderful base for product development. Is actually, is there a twist in the products that needs to be done? And of course, the validation of claims. Let's see if I can move on. Here we are. So, oops. Okay, so what we did is actually we wanted to test the efficacy of this product during and after use. I wonder if I skipped a chart, Karis. Yeah. I think it was a chart that you added, Karis. Let's see.
Sorry, I've muted myself and I'm going all over the place. Hi. So basically, yes, so I wanted to add this in. So as I mentioned, German advertising standards are not as clear as other advertising standards are about the evidence that needs to be in place for advertisements. They do say that you need evidence, but it's actually not incredibly clear. The EASA, however, are incredibly clear. So as I mentioned, even if you feel like, oh, I haven't really seen that on the German Advertising Standards Council website, I'm not too worried about it, you should be, because the EASA still definitely have authority over advertising standards in Germany as part of Europe. So they basically say that when you have a claim kind of complained about, they'll complain to your self-regulatory organization. In the case of a complaint, the advertiser should produce the necessary information without delay to the SRO. And it's just something I kind of like to bring up because obviously people kind of sometimes try and take a risk and say, well, I haven't got any advertising information, any substantiation for my claims. I'm going to put the product on the market anyway and kind of risk it. But if you get a complaint, you need to provide that evidence without delay. If you've got a 12-week claim on your study, you're not going to be able to do that without delay because you're going to need 12 weeks to do that study. So it's just really important to be aware of basically the kind of more specific legislation there for the ASA. Okay, back to you, Thomas.
Okay, thanks, Karis. So what we did, as the chart moves on. Okay, so what we did actually, we had a fairly small samples, fairly small study, but this is actually the absolute minimum of what you could do, where we had 60 respondents. They were all women. We had a split of 50% younger ones between 20 and 40, 50% the slightly older ones between 41 and 60 years old. Also to be clear that we have all kind of different skin ages. There should be daily use of face cream, have a demanding skin, no allergies, no eczema, dermatitis, or psoriasis. And of course, they should be healthy, not pregnant, breastfeeding. It's a kind of standard criteria that we make sure that they don't have any issues with their skin, with their health, and they can properly test the products. We sent them the products. They could test the product for 2 weeks, and they were supposed to test it every night. They received the sample, tested them at home. They had a two-part questionnaire. They got the first feedback after the first usage or during usage, so more or less immediately. And after 2 weeks, we had the final questionnaire, which is a bit longer, where we got the final questions and after the full experience. But we very often we gather the kind of first impressions versus the latest experience, the full experience, which also gives some more deeper insight into some more understanding of how the product performs and how people see it. This is a question that we very often get. What about timings? How does it work? This is a very typical standard timing. In the beginning, we get an order from our client, and the client sends us the samples, and in parallel we start the recruitment. And if it's a fairly standard, not a too difficult target group, we can recruit in that 1 week. If you really go and say, the other day we had a test with young babies or so, and of course it makes it a bit more difficult. In the second week, we ship the samples to volunteers. In Germany, it normally takes up to a week. Unless we really want to have a kind of speed delivery, then it's a bit more expensive, but also possible. We had 2 weeks of testing with the volunteers, and 1 week after the testing period was finished, all the results were in. So you see that within a month or so, you can get your full results, which is still not giving you the immediate response that Karis mentioned that they require. So you should start the test earlier, but still it's pretty fast and much faster than many clinical tests are. So now sharing with you some of the results. And these are all directly taken from the standard report that we can provide you with. So you probably know that ATEN provides you with a standardized automated report. And whenever someone else responds, you automatically get an update, and you get an update with a full report with all the tables and charts as I'm presenting them over here. So this was actually 53 people that responded. And the first question was just very simply, how well do you like the product during application? With a scale from bad to very good. And you very quickly see that the product was received fairly well. So most of them actually were in the area of 7, 8, 9, and there was nobody actually who really didn't like it. The second question is also a typical question, is actually how do you rate the scent during application from too weak to too strong? So these are the questions that help development, where you say, well, is there something that I need to tweak in terms of the scent? Is it a bit, should I tone it down a bit or tone it up a bit? Should I change it a bit one way or the other? And over here you see also very, very strong and very positive result that 70% of the respondents felt it was just right. So definitely no need to change anything in the formulation over here. A bit later on, we had a section on claims, and I'm just taking 2 examples of them. Question 10 was the product visibly smoothens my skin. And you here see a typical scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And again, you see that of course, with most questions, a bit polarizing. There are always some people who like it or don't like it, but the vast majority definitely was very positive on this. So you'll see that this is a claim that you can really actively use and promote. Same with the other example of the product intensely moisturizes my skin. Again, you see that the vast majority agrees, and there's hardly anyone who disagrees with this statement. What's quite nice, what I like about it is actually that you have the table with all the statistics behind it and a graphical expression. So for those people who are more into data, you can work with the data and the statistics, and those people who are a bit more graphical and optical minded, also those who are not into statistics, you can still see the results and work with them. What we have in our reports as well is in an appendix, a direct evaluation on how far you can actively use the scale. So over here you see these questions 10 and 11 that I explained, and you can decide, you can beforehand decide in how far you want agreement. So over here we said 66% should be satisfied to be able to use the claim and to actively promote the claim. And you saw that for the claim 10, the product visibly smoothens my skin, we had 73% who were satisfied. Question 11 was even 90%. Both are above the benchmark of 66%. So both are claims that you can use. So this is a very simple way of immediately seeing which claims are validated and which are not. And you can directly move ahead with your communication. So you don't need to have any detailed statistics, knowledge, or understanding. We provide you with all the background information to say I can use and I can work with a claim, or I can't. So we had, to sum it up, we had positive reception of the product in the German market. And what I'm showing you on the right-hand side is a chart that I also prepared for a client, where they had two standard questions. How do you rate the product overall, which is the x-axis, the horizontal axis. The vertical axis is, would you recommend the product to friends, acquaintances? And of course, this is highly correlated. If you like the product, you're also recommending it, and vice versa. And if you remember the data at the beginning of the first question, it was about 7.5 on the overall evaluation. So you see, this would definitely be up in the most promoted and best evaluated products. So if you do these tests more often, we can create benchmarks for you, or you can create your own benchmarks and see how your product performing versus other products, which also allows you to make a much better judgment in how far they will perform in the market afterwards. So this is also a matter of estimating the potential and working on it if you do these tests on a more regular basis. So I think this was what I wanted to tell you with my case study. Any questions, of course, we can come back at the end. And then I would just like to hand back to Karis.
Sorry, my muted microphone again. Thank you, Thomas. That was really helpful. And it's certainly, like I said, it's something I don't talk about a lot, but there is certainly the possibility for benchmarking as well. And it's great to kind of put that out there. So basically, just like I said, I want to talk about some examples of removed adverts. So we've seen what can happen if you do a test and it's really successful and you get those claims through Thomas's case study. But obviously, if you don't have the right evidence or if your claims are misleading, the backlash can be bad press. So this was what was mentioned from the German Advertising Standards Council. They said, obviously, if you ignore them, they can publicize the case, so you really want that. So this is just some examples of basically people that have been in the press, so newspaper examples for having misleading claims. So we've got one from L'Oreal. That was an interesting case because they basically got in trouble for having a 5-star UVA rating, but previously there was only a 3-star UVA rating. So it looked like it was a better product, but actually it was kind of, the baseline had been changed. So that wasn't, that was kind of misleading out there. The Pantene got in trouble for not having their claims substantiated for 10 times stronger. So that's really important to know. And also springs back to life, they didn't have that substantiated. So even though it's a puffery claim, sometimes, I don't know if you know that term, puffery claims, but there's certain claims they kind of say you can make because it's just puffery, advertising puffery. But lots of the times I would always recommend getting those kinds of claims substantiated with consumer research, because it means you're not making that risk. So even if claims kind of sound a bit like puffery, you might want to get a consumer research feedback on those to see if they will be substantiated. Oh, sorry, it's Thomas there. Get back. And Estee Lauder as well were in trouble for basically making up their results. So this is a really important one for me to bring up, because in the USA, there's not quite as strict regulations in terms of having independent testing houses. There very much is in the UK and in the rest of the EU. Your claim should be substantiated by an independent testing house. But in the USA, some brands do have their own internal testing houses, and it was found out that some of the staff were making up the results, so they got in trouble for misleading advertising claims there. And again, like I said, even if you could do internal advertising, internal investigations, maybe that's why it's worth having an independent testing house, because you know there's going to be no bias towards your brand there. So once you've got all of that lovely evidence, you've got your case study, it's just to point your direction into what do you do with that, where do you file it. So obviously every cosmetic product gets a product information file, so obviously that's everything like your safety data, your cost listings, but it should also be where you have your evidence to substantiate your advertising claims, as well as the supply of research, their credentials and relevant accreditations. And it should also contain all of those undesirable effects. So I talked earlier about how it's a really good way to get undesirable effect data for your, you know, on a larger scale and in actual use. And that can also go in your product information file. Really helpful if you're a responsible person, especially if you have an external responsible person, because they will have all of that information. Some further advice for advertising, for consumer studies, sorry. So basically we usually say about a panel starting around 100 responses. This can change per product. Sometimes you can have less, sometimes you need more. It really depends on your product and what claims you want to make. But it's just a guideline, because people often come to me and say, you know, what kind of responses would you suggest we start off with? So it kind of gives you that guideline from the start to sort of say, always think about 100 responses. And if you haven't got the product or budget, we can have a look at reducing that possibly. Or if your claims are really, really quite broad, like all skin types or all hair types or curl types, all these kinds of claims, we might look at a larger panel to make sure we've got a substantial amount of people of that subgroup on each of those in each of those sort of subgroups to substantiate those claims. So it might be the same if you're looking at global research. So you wouldn't want to have 100 responses split across the USA and Asia and the UAE necessarily. You might want to have at least 100 responses in each of those groups. So we can always provide advice there anyway. You should let... Oh.
If I may add to this.
Oh, yes, please do.
if you really want to show subtle differences also between products, the higher the sample size, also the higher the likelihood that you can also show significant differences. So if you have a low sample size, often you may see difference, but they might not be significant. But with a higher sample size, you definitely increase that kind of validity as well. So in many cases, it's useful to go up.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree. And that's a really good point. So again, we've had people want to do a comparison study with about 30 people on there. And it's sort of, you could do that, but you're not going to see any difference in the products because there won't be enough data to tell. So certainly, yes, as someone said, the bigger the group, the better you are off making any comparison claims, benchmark claims, or anything to do with a new formulation. So also with product liability insurance, you need to let your product liability insurance provider know that you're doing consumer studies with an external supplier. We also have product liability insurance, so that's really important to know for the protection of you as well as ourselves, and if there's any kind of serious undesirable effect, which there has never been in my whole time at Ace and Global Research, so not to panic on it, but it's always good to know you're protected. Always ensure your samples have been safety tested first. So people often ask me, what kind of testing do we need before we send you the samples? Well, it has to have been safety tested to the point that it can be released to your consumer. That varies for every product. If it's child products, obviously any product that's for a child under 3 years old needs to have been safety tested. Some products don't need safety testing. If, they get signed off by a safety assessor to say the ingredients are safe to use. We really leave it up to you, up to your product, because you need to know what safety testing is needed before you can release it on the market. If you are doing a study for claim substantiation, generally we want it to be blind. So all of your samples should be debranded or in blank packaging. It means there's no bias towards your brand at all. There are cases where you might want to have it branded, particularly if you're trying to get feedback on that branding, but as a general guide, try and make sure it's not. And your questionnaire design should always support your claims. So we can assist with questionnaire design as well to make sure that you're actually getting the right questions asked to make sure your claims are substantiated. And again, you can always seek professional advice from us or your research agency if you have any questions. So why to use us in particular? I've given you the spiel of claim substantiation and how to do it. So just another couple of points about 18 Global Research. So we're an award-winning research agency. We've won awards for International Business of the Year, Family Business of the Year, Apprenticeship Awards. We are fully compliant with GDPR, of course. We have to be, we're part of the EU, but we also have an ISO 27001 to audit us on that process, and our own data protection officer on site. So that's really important, not just for our consumers, because obviously we have very sensitive data about them, for our panelists, but also for you, because you're placing orders with very sensitive information about new product launches. So we're also, we have an Untitled event reporting. I've already mentioned that. That's all been done in accordance with the Cosmetic Vigilance Act. I've already mentioned product liability insurance. We've also got an ISO 9001, which is to do with quality assurance. So making sure obviously our quality is being audited. We're a partner to the Market Research Society. So obviously it lets you know that we're following their code of conduct and that the research is ethical as well as done properly. And we receive training for the MRS for things like questionnaire design and study design. We can give regulatory advice. As I mentioned, that is my speciality. So that's mainly about advertising regulations, but I also try and stay on top of any regulatory impact that our customers may have to do with cosmetics regulation, other regulations in FMCG, and also obviously advertising. So I can certainly help where I can, or I can signpost you to our partners or to companies that are very much involved in that area. So again, if I can't answer your questions in particular, I certainly try to know who I can signpost you to. You get a designated study manager. So as I said, that's how I started at the company. It is the person that will know everything about your company, why you're doing the research, and how you need your studies designed and questionnaires designed to make sure that you're achieving your research objectives, and there'll be one point of contact for you, so you're not passed around. You have one person that you can rely on. So I'm now going to open up for a Q&A. Oh, I'd say that. I'm going to skip slides. And I'm going to open up for a Q&A now. So if there's any questions anyone has, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box or in the live chat, and Thomas and I will do our best to answer them. If you do have any questions as well that you think of afterwards, of course, you can email us. So I know some people can't really think of anything on the spot, but certainly have questions following on. So I'll have a follow-up email for you, which will have my contact information and Thomas's contact information. So you'll be able to contact us directly. So I'll leave that open for a couple of minutes and just in case anything comes in, and then I'll move on.
Shoot questions, challenge us.
Yes, Thomas absolutely loves to be challenged as well. Certainly with all of his, well, of course we all do, but I'll leave it open for a little bit longer, but I'm not sure if anything will come in.
No, they can use the chat function, just type it in.
Yes.
Everybody seems to be happy.
Great. Well, I'll move along then, just to finish up. Oh. So just to point you to the SCS as well, which we're a part of, our Managing Director Susan Aiton is part on the council of the SCS. So they've got their distance learning course. So that's an industry recognised course in the essentials of cosmetic science. So if you're looking to basically enter the field of cosmetics, or if you want to increase your knowledge on cosmetic science, that is available in any country. It's all distance learning, so you can do that from the comfort of your own home. There's also the IFSCC Congress, which will be taking part in London from the 19th to 22nd of September 2022, and you can register your interest for that now at their website. Oh, keep doing that. I just also want to let you know about our next webinars. So Thomas and I are going to be doing a webinar every 2 weeks. We've got a few already in the calendar. So the next one's going to be on the 21st of August, which will be claim validation, consumer versus lab testing. So we've touched on that a bit today about what claims you can make through consumer testing, what claims you can make through clinical testing. And there are some that you can make through consumer testing and avoid clinical testing, and some that you must do clinical testing for. So we can give you some information on that. On the 3rd of September, we're going to have trends in the beauty industry, and we're going to touch on those and how you can substantiate those claims. We've got the 18th of September, why local does not exist anymore, the importance of an international outlook. This is where we've been talking about a lot, especially with COVID. People have to sell online. So there's not so much of a local market anymore. It's very much international. And at some point, we'll be doing how to create a good claim as well, but we haven't got a date in for that one. So watch this space. Please feel free to join our mailing list and to follow us on LinkedIn, because we do post on there. Just to finish off with some contact information for us both, but as I said, I will follow up with an email. Thank you very much for listening today, and thank you so much, Thomas, for joining as well.
Harris.
Thank you, everybody, and hopefully speak to you all soon.